Colonel Ingersoll's replies to his critics. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Colonel Ingersoll's replies to his critics is from the book Lectures of Colonel Robert Greene Ingersoll. Colonel Ingersoll's reply to Dr. Collier. Now they tell me, and there are several gentlemen who have spoken on this subject, the Reverend Mr. Collier, a gentleman standing as high as anybody, and I have nothing to say against him, because I denounced God, who upheld murder and slavery and polygamy, he said that what I said was slang. I would like to have it compared with any sermon that ever issued from the lips of that gentleman. And before he gets through he admits that the Old Testament is a rotten tree that will soon fall into the earth and act as a fertilizer for his doctrine. Is it honest in that man to assail my motive? Let him answer my argument. Is it honest and fair in him to say I am doing a certain thing because it is popular? Has it got to this, that in this Christian country, where they have preached every day hundreds and thousands of sermons, has it got to this that infidelity is so popular in the United States? If it has, I take courage. And I not only see the dawn of a brighter day, but the day is here. Think of it. A minister tells me in this year of grace, 1879, that a man is an infidel simply that he may be popular. I am glad of it. Simply that he may make money. Is it possible that we can make more money tearing up churches than in building them up? Is it possible that we can make more money denouncing the God of slavery than we can praising the God that took liberty from man? If so, I am glad. I call publicly upon Robert Collier, a man for whom I have great respect. I call publicly upon Robert Collier to state to the people of this city whether he believes the Old Testament was inspired. I call upon him to state whether he believes that God ever upheld these institutions, whether God was a polygamist, whether he believes that God commanded Moses or Joshua or anyone else to slay little children in the cradle. Do you believe that Robert Collier would obey such an order? Do you believe that he would rush to the cradle and drive the knife of theological hatred to the tender heart of a dimpled child? And yet when I denounce a God that will give such a hellish order, he says it is slang. I want him to answer, and when he answers he will say he does not believe the Bible is inspired. That is what he will say, and he holds these old worthies in the same contempt that I do. Suppose he should act like Abraham. Suppose he should send some woman out into the wilderness with his child in her arms to starve. Would he think that mankind ought to hold up his name forever for reverence? Robert Collier says that we should read and scan every word of the Old Testament with reverence, that we should take this book up with reverential hands. I deny it. We should read it as we do every other book, and everything good in it, keep it, and everything that shocks the brain and shocks the heart, throw it away. Let us be honest. Ingersoll's reply to Professor Swing. Professor Swing has made a few remarks on this subject, and I say the spirit he has exhibited has been as gentle and as sweet as the perfume of a flower. He was too good a man to stay in the Presbyterian Church. He was a rose among thistles. He was a dove among vultures, and they hunted him out, and I am glad he came out. I tell all the churches to drive all such men out. And when he comes I want him to state just what he thinks. I want him to tell the people of Chicago whether he believes the Bible is inspired in any sense except that in which Shakespeare was inspired. Honor bright, I tell you that all the sweet and beautiful things in the Bible would not make one play of Shakespeare. All the philosophy in the world would not make one scene in Hamlet. All the beauties of the Bible would not make one scene in the Midsummer Night's Dream. All the beautiful things about woman in the Bible would not begin to create such a character as Perdita or Imogen or Miranda. Not one. I want him to tell whether he believes the Bible was inspired in any other way than Shakespeare was inspired. I want him to pick out something as beautiful and tender as Burns' poem to Mary in heaven. I want him to tell whether he believes the story about the bears eating up children, whether that is inspired. I want him to tell whether he considers that a poem or not. I want to know if the same God made those bears that devoured the children because they laughed at an old man out of hair. I want to know if the same God that did that is the same God who said, "Suffer little children to come unto me, for such is the kingdom of heaven." I want him to answer it, and answer it fairly. That is all I ask. I want just the fair thing. Now, sometimes Mr. Swing talks as though he believed the Bible, and then he talks to me as though he didn't believe the Bible. The day he made this sermon I think he did, just a little, believe it. He is like the man that passed a $10 counterfeit bill. He was arrested, and his father went to see him and said, "John, how could you commit such a crime? How could you bring my gray hairs in sorrow to the grave?" "Well," he says, "Father, I'll tell you. I got this bill, and some days I thought it was bad, and some days I thought it was good. And one day when I thought it was good, I passed it. I want it distinctly understood that I have the greatest respect for Professor Swing, but I want him to tell whether the 109th Psalm is inspired. I want him to tell whether the passages I shall afterward read in this book are inspired. That is what I want." Ingersoll's reply to Brooke Herford, D.D. Then there is another gentleman here. His name is Herford. He says it is not fair to apply the test of truth to the Bible. I don't think it is myself. He says although Moses upheld slavery, that he improved it. They were not quite so bad as they were before, and heaven justified slavery at that time. Do you believe that God ever turned the arms of children into chains of slavery? Do you believe that God ever said to a man, "You can't have your wife unless you will be a slave. You cannot have your children unless you will lose your liberty. And unless you are willing to throw them from your heart forever, you cannot be free"? I want Mr. Herford to state whether he loves such a God. Be honor bright about it. Don't begin to talk about civilization, or what the church has done, or will do. Just walk right up to the rack and say whether you love and worship a God that established slavery. Honest. And love and worship a God that would allow a little babe to be torn from the breast of its mother and sold into slavery. Now tell it fair, Mr. Herford. I want you to tell the ladies in your congregation that you believe in a God that allowed women to be given to the soldiers. Tell them that. And then if you say it was not the God of Moses, then don't praise Moses any more. Don't do it. Answer these questions. Ingersoll Gatling gun turned on Dr. Ryder. Then here is another gentleman, Mr. Ryder, the Reverend Mr. Ryder, and he says that Calvinism is rejected by a majority of Christendom. He is mistaken. There is what they call the Evangelical Alliance. They met in this country in 1875 or 1876, and there were present representatives of all the evangelical churches in the world, and they adopted a creed, and that creed is that man is totally depraved. That creed is that there is an eternal, universal hell, and that every man that does not believe in a certain way is bound to be damned forever, and that there is only one way to be saved, and that is by faith, and by faith alone. and they would not allow anybody to be represented there that did not believe that, and they would not allow a Unitarian there, and would not have allowed Dr. Ryder there, because he takes away from the